earphones with English translation, so
Because those.
Earphones, yes, for English language. So take. So you should use it. Yes.
Yes.
Labdien!
Hello, honorable everybody present. We are beginning the joint press conference of Latvia's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Baiba, Braže, and President of the 78th session of the UN General Assembly, Denis Francis. It will happen in Latvian and English. The simultaneous interpretation is provided as well. Also, the press conference is being broadcast online on the home page of the ministry. And now I'll give the floor to the minister. Hello, honorable journalists. I am truly glad and honored to welcome the President of the UN General Assembly 78th session, Denis Francis, in his first visit here. It's been an active 2 days. He has come here from Ukraine. And yesterday, during dinner, we had the opportunity to discuss several questions linked to Ukraine as well. And today we have formal discussions. And the UN youth delegates from Latvia also participated. They are here in the room with us today as well. And this is linked to the UN's work not only today, but in the future. And in autumn, the UN will have the Future Summit where our youth delegates will participate, not only experienced diplomats and government representatives. And of course, this will prepare the organization for future challenges. And it is clear that for Latvia, UN is very important. So we became a member in 1991 after restoring independence. It was a great day when, among other flags, the Latvian flag and other Baltic state flags were finally flown. And we were a full-fledged member of the international society with our sovereignty restored. And of course, we had a lot of work to be done with having Russian troops exit Latvia. We had, when of course the UN resolutions and consensus helped us, international societies helped us. So it was a common effort to have the Russian army exit Latvia, be withdrawn 3 years later. And now, in August this year, it will be 30 years that our country doesn't have a foreign army in it. And year by year, we have continued to work in the UN, and now our work is not only concentrated to the priority, which is security, and of course renewing the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine and stopping Russian aggression, so that the UN Charter principles are carried out and respected, and working with questions which are important to other countries and regions. For example, climate change, because these can cause, for example, severe storms in the Caribbean. And as the UNGA president told us, that the type of weather that we see in the Caribbean, we wouldn't see this early in the season. And of course, we can mention these great changes in the Chad region with a lot of famine and mass migration of people and conflicts, or other states, great challenges and practical problems which are linked to simply feeding people, that there's insufficient food and water, which leads to migration and other problematic issues that definitely affect the whole world. So that is the UN, that's the role of the UNGA. The president has been extremely effective, a leader of the General Assembly. And if the UNSC, for example, is not able to make a decision, so this question is very quickly discussed in the General Assembly, and all countries can express their opinions. And of course, that has been in questions linked to Ukraine and other questions. So thank you very much for your work, Mr. President. And for Latvia, the UN has been and still will be very important for our sovereignty, and of course important for us to be an active member and make reforms, and hoping to work in the UNSC representing all member states and to ensure this respect to the UN Charter. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Minister, and now the floor to Mr. Francis.
Madam Minister, let me begin by expressing my grateful thanks to the government and people of Latvia for the very warm reception that you've accorded my team and I. We have come from a visit to Ukraine. And so we thought that while we are in the neighborhood, knowing the sort of almost umbilical relationship between Latvia and the UN, that we should also visit Latvia as a very reliable partner of the United Nations. Latvia plays a very important role in certain intergovernmental processes taking place in New York in the negotiations. Your permanent representative there co-facilitates very sensitive processes, and I'm happy to say does so in a manner that is a great credit not just to Latvia, but to the United Nations as a whole. There's no doubt that we are living in difficult times. We've had a war of aggression perpetrated by the Russian Federation against the people of Ukraine. What is most bothersome is that there does not appear to be any immediate change or reprieve from the ongoing hostilities. So matters of peace and security have again come to stand front and center in the work of the United Nations. Now, many people do not understand that peace and security, as important as it is, constitutes only 1/3 of the work of the UN. There are two other pillars: human rights and sustainable development. And they are equally important. But peace and security, by its very nature, tends to dominate the agenda. And to do so in a way that creates the sense that we need to do more. We need to recommit to the Charter and to its fundamental principles, because it is a rules-based system. I do not refer to the Charter as the Charter. I tend to refer to the Charter as our Charter, because when you sign on to the United Nations, you've taken a solemn oath to uphold and to honor the provisions and the principles in the Charter. And that must mean something. You cannot, therefore, whimsically violate the rules and expect that there will not be consequences. Because if everyone started to violate the rules, then obviously we would have no United Nations. The premise of the UN is that all member states will honor their commitments under the Charter. And that includes the Russian Federation. I know that Latvia and many other countries in the neighborhood, Poland and others, have borne a heavy price as a consequence of the Russian aggression in Ukraine. You've opened your homes and your hearts to many Ukrainian nationals and provided care and support, humanitarian care and support to people whom you don't know. And I would like to take this opportunity, Minister, to commend the government and people of Latvia for doing this, for doing the right thing. Because there's a sense in which it's Ukraine now, but who knows for the future what might be the situation in another country. This is the, I think there's no better word to describe it, but the magic of multilateralism. That we make common cause to help those who need help, to strengthen those who are weak, and to create hope that tomorrow can and will be better. All of the evidence that I've been exposed to here in Latvia and in other places indicates the fulsome engagement of Latvian society in caring for and supporting the people of Ukraine in what is likely to be a long quest. So we have to commit not to be weak-kneed, because this requires a long-term commitment. This requires determination, true grit. But you know what? If you're fighting for your principles and your values, it will be worth it in the end. Because it is those principles and values that define what the United Nations is all about, what the General Assembly is all about. And so the General Assembly, in the midst of paralysis by the Security Council, has taken up the gauntlet and determined that we will not sit idly by and allow Russian aggression to proceed as if it were normal. The General Assembly has convened a number of emergency special sessions on Ukraine, and as well something called the Veto Initiative, which requires the offending member of the P5 to come before the General Assembly and explain its actions. As well it should, because the General Assembly appoints the Security Council, and therefore there's an accountability requirement there. This has created some transparency and some accountability, but I fear that there's a risk that this will become a routine exercise. A resolution goes to the Security Council, it's voted down, the veto is used, and then the offending member state comes to the General Assembly and makes a statement, and everyone goes home. I hope, and I have asked for some work to be done to uncover whether there are additional mechanisms that might be explored in order to push the envelope of the veto mechanism. Because this is just too important to be left alone. So thank you very much, Madam Minister. What I saw in Ukraine was a country determined to succeed. A country with great pride, and a country that is confident in its future. They deserve the support of the international community. The question of the war in Ukraine will continue to be an item on the agenda of the General Assembly of the UN going forward. Until that matter is resolved, until that war comes to an end, that agenda item will remain a key item on the agenda of the General Assembly. Thank you.
Paldies, Prezident kungs.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. One question from journalists. Please announce yourself and who are you addressing the question. So Ines Trenča from Latvian news agency Leta. Question for both Mr. Francis and Mrs. Braže. Mr. Francis, you outlined the main working objectives and goals. So I would like to ask you, what is the UN role in these new challenging geopolitical conditions? And for Mrs. Braže, we have a similar question, but in the context of Latvia's candidacy in the UNSC.
Lūdzu, Prezident kungs.
Mr. President.
The first thing that I'd like to say is that the UN is a political organization. That's given, that's a fact. It's a political organization. So the fact that of late geopolitical tensions and concerns have risen to an extraordinary level within the UN is not per se new. We've had instances of this in the past, perhaps not as highly developed as now, but we've come this way before. The General Assembly, as the largest and most democratic organ of the UN, really functions in the resolution it passes as the conscience of the international community. It informs and reveals international public opinion. And as well it should, because there are 193 member states in the General Assembly. So when, for example, the resolution on Ukraine attracts 141 votes, that's an overwhelming majority of votes. it telescopes an important message. Because the UN is a political organization, most countries are not comfortable and will not seek to be politically isolated. Political isolation is not a desire of any country, because then your powers are limited. And so the geopolitics are there, but the General Assembly will continue to do its work, as we have when it comes to Ukraine and when it comes to other issues. There's no question about it. We have a mandate, and we are determined to execute that mandate in accordance with the Charter and the law. And geopolitics may be present in the environment. We cannot avoid that. We did not create it, but we cannot avoid it. We still have to maintain our work programs of seeking to deliver benefit and advantage to people who need it, to the 1 billion hungry people on the planet, and to the 1 billion people who live in abject poverty on the planet. These are real people. We do not become too bogged down in the geopolitics, because those situations are, in a sense, external. They've been created by third parties. What we need to do is to focus on getting good, strong decisions that empower people and empower the planet, so that our civilizations can grow and prosperity would become normal and expansive, so that, in fact, we leave no one behind. This is not a cliche. Leaving no one behind is not a cliche. Because if you think about it, if you're leaving people behind, you're creating categories. And the whole thrust of the work of the UN is that all human beings are equal in rights. So we need to be sure that we do not create the basis for leaving people behind, and work actively to lift people up, give them hope, even as we continue to deal with the unseemly Russian aggression.
Paldies, Prezident kungs. Ministrs kundzei atbilde.
Paldies.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. A very short reply. So the UN, as the only global organization, is only growing in these geopolitical circumstances. Of course, in the context of the Russian aggression in Ukraine and the international society's stance, which has been expressed in the UN context, which is very important for us, are the pillars of peace and security, but also human rights and development. Also the Middle East and renewed stability there, and no further development of the conflict in the region. Of course, providing humanitarian aid for people in need. And also the UN's role in this context is very important by providing information, by providing access. For example, the people that Russia has kidnapped from Ukraine, be it prisoners of war or children. So the UN experts have to have access there in accordance with international law. And also, as I mentioned, the questions that other countries in other regions see as important. For example, some island nations with the water levels rising just by a centimeter, they would have to dislocate their inhabitants away. So in international law, we have asked the question, can you create a country in a different place with the same structures? So in the context of international law, how could this be done? So all of these questions have been and will be in the agenda of the UN Security Council, of course. Not allowing any sexual violence in armed conflicts, and of course questions of women's empowerment and questions linked to countries that the climate crisis has caused an existential threat, both for the survival of their people and the sovereignty of these states. So these will all be questions within our agenda. So our general motive is together for peace and resilience. So thank you, Mrs. Minister. Thank you, Mr. President. And the press conference is closed. Thank you for your attention.